Welcome back to All This Math. This is Professor Parker. Please make sure you are subscribed to the All This Math YouTube channel. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you drop some comments down below. Make sure you share this video with some other people. All right. So what we about to get into? You see how I got this up here, right? Yeah. So this is like a Philly thing, right? And Philly is one of my homes. I like to think of right about now. I got like dual citizenship because I be in Baltimore so much. So I'm either in Philly or Baltimore. It's one of the two places I'm gonna be at. Um, but the mayor of Philadelphia, Sherelle Parker, she made a mistake, and instead of spelling the word Eagles correctly at a press conference, she spelled it incorrectly. She said ELGLES Eagles, and it became like a running joke. But actually, there's a teachable moment in that, right? There's a couple teachable moments. One teachable moment is that you human. Human beings make mistakes. Like in math class, we need to lean into mistakes and use mistakes as opportunities for learning, right? So we can embrace the mistakes because a lot of students be scared to make mistakes in math class. So they never actually end up learning. And a lot of times they don't even try, right? They won't try to do a problem because that's how you guarantee to not make a mistake. If you don't even try, you guarantee to not make a mistake, right? But the mistakes are actually helpful, right? But we got to create safe learning environments where children feel like it's safe to make a mistake. Like it's cool if I make a mistake. Like the teacher not gonna yell at me, make me feel dumb. My classmates not gonna laugh at me, make me feel dumb or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like we got to create those safe learning environments. And also when you get home too. So if you're a parent watching this, when your children come home with that homework, you can't like create an environment where. And I had to work on this too myself, right? You know what I'm saying? You can't create an environment where your children feel scared to ask you for help because they know that if they get a wrong answer or if they don't catch on right away, you're gonna start drawing and start like yelling at them and like cursing them out or whatever, right? That's not a safe environment, so they're not gonna want to make mistakes, so they're not even gonna try, right? And that's the tragedy in that, right? So the mayor made a mistake on television, and my other thing about it is this too: it was people around her at the press conference at the podium and they just gonna let her cook and like rock out. Even when she was done, ain't nobody step up and be like, wait, hold up, we need to run that back. No, we gotta do that again because like we gotta, you know what I mean? You ain't say it right. You know what I mean? All them people. I'm more focused on. I wasn't so much focused on the fact that she made the mistake because the error is human, right? But I'm looking at the other people around her. Everybody just going like, ain't nobody gonna say nothing. Ain't nobody gonna like step up and be like, yo, we need to, you know what I mean? We need to run that back. But that's what I was more wondering about. So I don't know. Maybe they was, worried about offending her or whatever. But anyway, that's a small thing. What we about to do right now is we're gonna talk about the Super Bowl just passed. The Eagles won. They beat the Chiefs, and Jalen Hurts, the quarterback for the Eagles, he had a good day, right? And we're gonna calculate his quarterback passer rating, right? It's a mathematical formula. And what I always try to do, if you're familiar with this channel, or if you're not familiar with this channel, I try to make math relevant as possible. I try to meet people where they are, show them how they can use algebra in everyday life, right? So if you're a football fan, this is how you can use algebra. This is how what you're going to use this stuff for. Because the kids always get mad and be in class like, why I got to learn this? When am I gonna use this? How's this going to help me in life? Well, if you watch football, if you play football, if you're a quarterback, especially if you are a quarterback, you should definitely know how to calculate your own quarterback passer rating. You shouldn't have to wait for nobody else to tell you. You shouldn't have to have Chat GPT tell you. You shouldn't have to wait for your coach to tell you. Nobody should have to tell you. You should be able to figure it out yourself using basic algebra, which is what we about to do. So I want you to understand basic algebra and how to use it. And I've done some other videos like this on the channel. I calculated the quarterback passer rating for like Lamar Jackson, I think a couple times. Um, and yeah, so we about to do it again. So, Jalen Hurts is probably going to go down in history as, one of the best quarterbacks in Eagles history, but also be a Philly legend. But another Philly legend that I want to highlight is this brother right here, this ancestor, the late David P. Richardson. The late David P. Richardson. So if you're not familiar with David P. Richardson, David P. Richardson was a brother from Germantown, right? Germantown section of Philadelphia. Ended up becoming was a local activist, right? In that community, had a kind of complex history, but ended up being an activist and also ended up being a state representative working down in Harrisburg. He passed away in 1995, I want to say. Was a supporter of Mumia Abu Jamal, who was a political prisoner from North Philly, and just a solid brother. So do your research on David P. Richardson, right? The local politician from Philadelphia, David P. Richardson, definitely a Philly legend. All right, I want y'all to understand this. All right. So let's get into this problem. So how do you calculate quarterback passer rating? So this is a formula, right? So look what we got here. We got a fraction, right? We got a fraction. The numerator says a plus b plus c plus d. The denominator is a 6. So a plus b plus c plus d, or the sum of a, b, c, and d divided by 6, and then times 100. You multiply 100 because it's going to be because you're going to have a decimal, which is going to convert to, a whole number, right? Yeah, basically, that's a good way to describe it. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, see, I used to like math until they put the letters in it. Why we got to have letters in it? Well, excuse me, we got letters in it because the letters represent values that we don't know yet. That's the only purpose of putting letters in math and in algebra, because you got to represent things you don't know yet. Because what does algebra do? Algebra helps you to figure out something you don't know. So how do you represent the thing you don't know? You represent it with a letter, right? Now, in the other videos I did on this channel, where I calculated the quarterback passer rating, what I did was I threw all the information in the formula at one time and just worked everything out. It took up like the whole board, right? And I did it that way. But then I started thinking today, when I was prepping to do this video, I was doing all the math on my paper and whatnot. I was like, yo, why don't I do this the way I do the quadratic formula? Now, the way I do the quadratic formula and the way I've been doing it for years is instead of just throwing all the numbers in the formula at one time and then working everything out, with the quadratic formula, what I do is I calculate the discriminant. Now, anybody, if you're not familiar with the quadratic formula, the discriminant is the part that's underneath of the radical sign part, the b squared minus 4ac part, just that part. Because what I do is it's like I'm playing like a mental trick on myself, right? It makes me feel like the formula not that long. If I break down the b squared minus 4ac part, the discriminant, if I do that on the side first, and then I end up with a number, and then I just throw that single number under the radical sign, it makes me feel like I'm doing less work, because it makes me feel like it's less work to do, because I'm so used to throwing all the numbers, because this is how I was taught back in the day in middle school. Throw all the numbers in the formula at one time and then just rock out, right? But what you realize is, like, sometimes it makes you more susceptible to make mistakes and errors and whatnot, which are not always a bad thing, but you do want to avoid them if possible, right? So what I do is with the quadratic formula, I calculate the discriminant first. I arrive at a single number, and then I take that single number and throw that into the radical sign in the larger formula, and it ends up being less work to do. So I basically break it down into two parts. I'm gonna do this one the same way. So instead of putting because A is equal to another formula of its own, B is equal to another formula of its own, C is equal to its own formula, D is equal to its own formula. So what I'm gonna do is off to the side, we're gonna calculate A, B, C, and D individually, right? And I'm gonna tell you what they represent. And then I'm gonna just take them numbers and throw them in there. And then we're just gonna have that number plus that number plus that number plus that number. Find the sum divided by 6, and then multiplying by 100, we're gonna have an answer. All right. So now I know somebody else might say, well, why we gotta know how to calculate this? You could just go on ESPN.com, or you could just go on this website, go on that website. You can ask Siri, ask Alexa. That's cool. I know that. But it's important to just know how to do stuff. You should just want to know how to do stuff. Why would you not want to know how to do something? Right? Why would you be comfortable? Like, granted, okay, of course, right? It's nice that, you could go to a restaurant and allow somebody else to cook for you. You could order some food from somewhere, right? But shouldn't you also know how to cook for yourself? Because what if it's a situation where you can't order from somewhere, or you don't feel like going out? Well, maybe your pocket's not like that. Your money not like that right about that time of the month, right? So you need to like cook. You need to pull out some groceries and cook or whatever, right? It's the same thing. It's just good to know how to do stuff. All right. So anyway, what do these letters stand for? A stands for what we call the completion percentage factor. All right, the completion percentage factor. B is the yards per attempt factor. C is his touchdown percentage factor, and D is his interception percentage factor. All right, so we got completion percentage factor, yards per attempt factor. That's passing yards, not running yards. Like, quarterback passer rate doesn't deal with like rushing yards for a quarterback. It doesn't. It don't deal with that. C is the touchdown percentage factor, and D again is the interception percentage factor. So let's throw the formulas up here. So the first formula is, so we're gonna find A, right? So A is equal to the number of completions divided by the number of attempts minus 0.3, and then you take that and multiply that by 5. So the number of completions. So I did the research. So on Sunday at the Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts was 17 for 22, right? He completed 17 passes. He threw 22 times and completed 17 of those passes. So he was 17 for 22. That's a fraction, 17, 20 seconds. All right. So we replaced the word completion with the number 17, replace the word attempt with 22. Then we're going to do minus 0.3. And then we're going to multiply that by 5. Now, if you're watching this at home, you could pause this video right now and go grab your calculator and do the calculation. I mean, you could do it manually, but I wouldn't do 7. I wouldn't take the time to do 17 divided by 22 on paper. I wouldn't do that. I don't think that's sufficient. You can, but I wouldn't do that. I would use a calculator. So 17 divided by 22. And like I said, I already did the math. 17 divided by 22, right? I don't have that decimal written down on my paper. But when you subtract 0.3 and then multiply by 5, you end up with this number, 2.3636. And this is a decimal that goes on forever, right? It's rational. It's not irrational. It's rational because it goes on forever with a pattern. So it just keeps repeating 36, 36, 36, 36. That's what makes it rational. So make sure you know what a rational number is compared to an irrational number. All right, irrational numbers go on forever and ever with no pattern, just random, right? Like pi. Pi goes on forever and ever with no pattern. 3.1415926, on and on and on and on. I only know it up to that 6. But yeah, this is rational. All right. So now I used the calculator for this. I did 17 divided by 22. I got a number. I got some decimal. That's probably pretty close to 1. And then I subtracted 0.3 from that. And then I took that difference and I took that and I multiplied it by 5. All right. I took that and multiplied it by 5 and I got this. And why did I round it to 4 decimal places? No real reason. No real reason. I just felt like doing it. You know what I'm saying? All right. Now, B is so this is this is our completion percentage factor. This 2.3636. Now we're going to figure out what B is. Then we're going to figure out what C is. Then we're going to figure out what D is. So B is the yards per attempt factor. So how many yards, like, divided up by how many times he threw the ball, his number of attempts. All right. So this is the formula for B. So for B, we got the number of total yards he accumulated, right, divided by the attempts, how many pass attempts he had, subtract 3 from that, right? And then we're going to do that times 0.25. All right. So now, how many yards did he have? I did the research. Jalen Hurts at the Super Bowl, he threw for 221 yards. All right. So 221 yards, right? So 221 yards divided by how many attempts? Threw the ball 22 times. All right. Threw it 22 times. And then we subtract the 3. So we're just following the formula. The formula is just a set of instructions. It's like a recipe. You know what I'm saying? So if you know how to cook, you know what I'm saying? You know how to follow recipes, you know how to follow formulas. You should be able to do algebra. It ain't too different. All right. So then we do that. And then we're going to multiply it by the 0.25. Don't forget about the 0.25. And then we got this divided by that. So when you calculate it, right, you do the 221 divided by 22, you get a whole number, right? Well, not a whole number. It's going to be a decimal because 22 is not a factor of 221, I'm pretty sure. But 221 divided by 22 gives you a number. You take that number, you subtract 3 from it. Then you take that number, you multiply that by 0.25. That's what this is telling you to do. Once you do that, you get this decimal. Now, again, I'm rounding everything off to 4 decimal places. So I'm doing 1.7614 is what I end up with. I end up with 1.7614. This is my yards per attempt factor. My yards per attempt factor, 1.7614, 1.7614. All right. Now, let's calculate C. What is C? C is the touchdown percentage factor. My man threw for 2 touchdowns, right? Yeah, he threw for 2 touchdowns. All right. So we got C, which is going to be, this is how you calculate that. The number of touchdowns divided by the attempted passes, and then you just multiply that by 20. That's kind of light, right? That's easier than the first 2, right? So we got, let's see, he had 2 touchdowns, so we're going to replace this with a 2. How many attempts did he have? He had 22. So 2 divided by 22, and then times 20. So 2 divided by 22, we take that decimal, right? Multiply it by 20. Our product is 1.8182. Now I rounded this off. 1.8182 because this I think was a repeating decimal like this one. It was 81, 81, 81, 81, 81. I think. Yeah, but this is our touchdown percentage factor. So we got our completion percentage factor, our yards per attempt factor, and our touchdown percentage factor. All right. So we got 3 out of the 4 numbers we need up here. 3 out of the 4 numbers we need up here. Right. We're about to find the fourth one. All right. The interception percentage factor. So the interception percentage factor, that formula is a little more elaborate. So you start out with 2.375. Right. You start out with 2.375. Then we're going to subtract and we're going to do the quantity of, because whenever we got in algebra, whenever we got stuff inside of a set of parentheses, it's a quantity, right? It's a quantity. So the quantity of the number of interceptions he threw divided by the number of attempts, and then we're going to take that fraction, multiply that by 25, right? So what does that look like? That's going to look like 2.375 minus, how many interceptions did he throw? I think he only threw one interception. That wasn't too crazy. 1 divided by his 22 attempted passes, right? And then times 25. All right. So when you do the math on that, what I would do, right, if I'm using a calculator, even if I'm, however I'm doing this, I will follow order of operations. I will work out what's in the parentheses first, right? And then in the parentheses, I'm working on left to right. So I'm going to do 1 divided by 22. That's going to give me a decimal, right? And then I'm going to take that decimal and multiplying by 25, right? Then I'm going to take that and I'm going to subtract that from 2.375. So I'm going to do 2.375 minus whatever this product is. Whatever this product is. And when I did that, I got 1.2386. So this is our interception percentage factor. So we got our interception percentage factor. So we got all the information we need in order to find the quarterback passer rating. All right. So we got these 4 numbers. And actually, I like doing this better because this is more neat. To me, it's more neat. It's more clean. It's more organized. You just find your 4 numbers and then take your 4 numbers, throw them in the formula later, and then you do the simple math because then you just got to do some addition, boom, 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 add them up, then divide that sum by 6, and then take that quotient, because that's the answer when you divide. It's called a quotient. Take that quotient, multiply them by 100, and then we know the quarterback passer rating. All right. So another reason that I think is good to do this is because, a lot of times people make mistakes on the internet. People enter information wrong. There's operator error. Anything can happen. I think it's a good way to verify what information we find. Like you might ask Siri, you might ask Alexa, you might just go online and Google something, right? And get some information. It's cool to be able to verify to know if it's correct or not. And if you have algebra in your arsenal as one of your tools, you can verify that, right? Verification is important. Just like how when you log into some websites, you may have to do two-factor verification because they want to make sure it's you and not nobody trying to hack into your stuff and all that, right? So it's good to be able to verify information that you find online sometimes. All right. Just like you want to verify stuff people say sometimes, because people say all types of stuff out here. But anyway, we got our 4 numbers. Something I want to bring up that doesn't apply to this situation because it just doesn't. But if you ever end up with a number that's larger than 2.375 for any of these factors, 1, 2, 3, 4, then you basically just drop it down to 2.375, right? Yeah, because if he threw for like 800 yards in the game or something crazy like that, you might end up with a number that's much larger than 1.7614, right? So if you end up with a number that's larger than 2.375 for any of these, you just cap it at 2.375. So even if you end up with, do the math, you end up with 3.79, right? You drop it down to 2.375. You don't put in 3.79. You don't do that. All right. Also, if you end up with a negative number, because somebody might have had a real bad day out there, if you end up with a negative number, then you just make it a 0. Just bring it up to 0 because all negative numbers are less than 0, right? 0 is larger than every negative number. Make sure you know that. All right. So that's just a couple of footnotes about calculating the quarterback passer rating, but it don't apply here. It don't apply here. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use this actual formula. So we got QBPR is equal to what? This plus this plus this plus this, right? So I'm gonna just do the math. I'm gonna just find the sum of these four numbers. So the sum of these four numbers, and I already did it on paper. I got it on paper. Is 7.1818, right? 7.1818. So we got 7.1818, and then we're gonna divide him by 6, and then multiply by 100. Now again, where did I get 7.1818 from? I followed the formula: A plus B plus C plus D. Where'd they come from? What is A? A is 2.3636. What is B? 1.7614. What is C? 1.8182. What is D? 1.2386. Right? So this is like the way we did this problem is like how somebody might cook a large meal, or maybe even not that large of a meal, right? You make different dishes. Let's say you're making four different things, right? Making four different things. And you got to do four different things to make those four different things. But at the end of the day, you put them all together and put everything on the plate at the end, and this is what you got. So when you're doing algebra and using formulas, think of it that way. It's the same approach, right? It's like for breakfast, you might make some scrambled cheese eggs, you might make some toast, you might make some grits, you might make shrimp and grits, you know, if you're a fan of that. You might make also some turkey bacon or some turkey sausage, or you might not, you might want to try to not get too much cholesterol. So you might do some vegetarian sausage or something like that or whatever. You know what I mean? So, whatever you do. But my point is, with a large breakfast, you're making different things, right? So the same way you're gonna make those different things, and you gotta, know what to make first, know what to make second. You gotta calculate, okay, how much time do I need for this? How much time do I need for that? Right? You do math the same way. We do algebra the same way. We use formulas the same way, right? So that should help us to, accept the fact that it's really not as difficult as a lot of people make it out to be, right? So now we're almost done. So now we're gonna do the division. We're gonna do 7.1818 divided by 6, and then multiply that by 100. We get 1.1. Well, if I divide this, my quotient is 1.1970, and then I'm gonna multiply that by 100, and then that's gonna equal, again, how do you multiply any number by 100? Now the old school way, take the decimal point, slide them two spaces to the right. So that would be 119.7. 119.7. Now, some books, some curriculum might say leave the decimal point where it is. This is what some people call the new math, right? Leave the decimal point where it is, and instead slide the digits two spaces to the left. You get the same result. You know what I'm saying? It's like half a dozen and six in the other. You know what I mean? Like you get the same result. But just understand that, it's just a different way of doing things. Like the Eureka Math curriculum wants children to leave the decimal point where it is and instead move the digits. Whereas the way I learned it 30, almost 40 years ago was when you multiply by 100, move the decimal point two spaces over. When you multiply by 10, move the decimal point one space over, and so on and so forth. However many zeros is in the number, if it's a power of 100, like 10, 100,000, 10,000, 100,000, so on and so forth, and all that, right? That's how many spaces you're going to move the decimal point. But either way is cool. Either way is cool. But it's good to know multiple ways of doing it. So we end up with 119.7. That boy had should say that brother, that's a grown man, right? He had a 119.7 quarterback passer rating. All right. So again, so we did some algebra, right? But this is football related algebra, right? Super Bowl related algebra, right? So I think it is very important to make math relevant. If we can make math relevant, there's a higher chance that children will gravitate toward it. Our children will gravitate toward it. They'll want to learn it because there's more of a purpose in it for them, right? But we as parents, have to learn it too, and as teachers, we have to learn it, and be able to pivot sometimes and embrace different uses for the algebra that we're expecting them to do. And if I took the time to go through this and like pulled out every standard that we addressed, right, in all of this, like I could probably fill this board up with a bunch of standards. So this also is preparation for standardized testing, because standardized testing is a big deal, right? But my point is, make the math as relevant as you possibly can, whenever possible, and have your students practice. If you're a parent watching this, have your children practice. and you make sure you know how to do it too, right? Set a good example in the household. If they see you doing it, then they're going to realize that it matters, you know? And also, definitely look up my man, David P. Richardson. All right. I'll see you all on the next video.